Deciding to launch a crusade against ignorance on the internet is like an ant colony trying to launch a full-scale invasion of the moon. I have a low opinion of humanity, but playing by the numbers alone, there must be some corner of the world with internet access where people might actually want to learn shit. So after requiring a somewhat willing academic to help me spew out a remotely intelligible script or two, here is a channel dedicated to philosophy and stickmen. As with most introductions, we need to understand what philosophy is. Philosophy is notoriously difficult to define since it doesn't deal in the tangible objects in the everyday world that can be measured and found to have this or that property and not another. Philosophy is more concerned about our thoughts about ourselves, the wider world, and our position within it. It is not about learning true facts or about constructing something in the right way, but instead ask more reflective questions like, what is true reality? How do we know what truth is? What are we? What is the right thing to do? The answers to these questions can't be discovered or proved, but have to be fought out with the reasons for and against each answer weighed against them, hopefully leading to new questions and new answers. Philosophy is less a definitive body of knowledge and more of a process of thought and debate. Socrates is often thought of as an exemplar of philosophy. We don't have any of his writings, but Plato describes him as travelling around ancient Athens asking anyone who would listen questions about truth, beauty, and virtue. In his dialogues with his followers, problems would be posed and clarified, whilst possible solutions were subjected to critical examination with the intention of rooting out erroneous thinking. Of course, all this questioning didn't go down well with the established social order, which eventually tried and executed Socrates. Although academic philosophy rarely results in execution today, there are still many parts of the world where questioning certain beliefs or expressing particular opinions can still lead to imprisonment. A reminder of the power and importance of asking questions and reasoning through answers. In fact, it's very difficult to avoid philosophy, even in everyday life. Most people hold some basic view or other about what the world is, our place within it, and how we should act. And these basic beliefs or worldviews affect the way we live our lives and interact with each other. But we aren't content about having our own personal views. We want to know what the better or more right view is. We want to convince others of what we think is correct. And we do this by philosophical debate, by defining ideas, setting out arguments, teasing out their implications, and analysing their strengths and weaknesses. And we can't help but do this, whether we are by ourselves contemplating what to do next, with our family and friends discussing some issue over dinner, or in a heated debate with some stranger we met online. As broad and as vague as that all sounds, there are a number of recurring questions and topics that have been probed by philosophers over the past 2 or 3 millennia. And these all form the main divisions of philosophy. The first is the almost mystic sounding, what is reality, which is referred to as metaphysics. It queries the fundamental nature of reality and the characteristics that objects exhibit. Is reality just physical? Are objects particulars or universals? Further subdivisions within metaphysics include cosmology, which deals with space and time, and ontology, which deals with what kind of beings exist. Next is epistemology, which deals with the theory of knowledge. It asks questions like, what is truth, and how do we know anything? Aesthetics asks philosophers questions about artistic representation and our experience of beauty. Is beauty subjective or objective? How do we find meaning in art? The final main division is political and ethical philosophy, which is concerned with human behaviour. It asks questions like, is there good and bad? What should I do? And how should society be governed? This is probably the division of philosophy that is discussed most commonly in everyday life. Throughout this series, we will delve into the main branches of philosophy and assess various philosophers' answers to the big questions. We will cover the most important philosophers in Western history, but since philosophy isn't about facts and dates, we won't be following the history of philosophy. Our concern will be to get to grips with philosophical process and method. We will learn how to ask questions, formulate ideas, make arguments, and interrogate problems. This issue-led formatting means we won't begin with the ancient Greek philosophical schools like most introductions to philosophy. Our next episode will instead begin with the very problem of beginning to do philosophy. How do we begin? Where do we start? We will find that beginning philosophy is more difficult and more interesting than it initially seems.